to Brother Errol.
Oh, Errol, okay.
Is in Baton Rouge.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening. Good evening.
Errol, what's going on, brother?
Ain't too much. Thank you guys so much for having me tonight.
No, it's a blessing, man. What's going on in Red Stick, brother?
Oh, wait, let's see. We are, we're the home of Southern University, the Southern University. So,
oh, you a Southern grad?
Yeah, Southern grad. Class of 89.
Man, y'all made it through the Bayou Classic. I'm sorry about that game, but I know that ain't the only thing goes on down there during that time. So
it's always a bitter pill when you lose to Grambling. We don't like to lose to them and shoot marbles. Nothing.
I know. Hey, look, man, I'm not from New Orleans. I'm not from Louisiana, but I have very dear friends in northern and southern Louisiana. And if you're not part of Black communities, you can't understand how deep y'all feel that thing, man. People say Louisiana, no sir. People talking about Ohio State versus Michigan. I said you better keep that in the social structure. You know, until you experience Grambling versus Southern versus Grambling, you don't know nothing about it, brother.
yeah. That's our sisters and brothers, except for that 1 week in November. Then we don't get down like that.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Man. So listen, I do want to try to keep it tight as they've
asked. No, of course. That's on me, man. I'm sorry, I mean take you off track.
No. What's up? I appreciate it. I'm a pastor here in Baton Rouge.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And since I've hooked up with you guys, man, I got to tell you that you have really opened my mind to this idea of African spirituality, African traditional religions, and how it relates to Christianity and the theft of traditional spiritual notions and idea. In fact, when I talked to you the first time, when I heard you the first time, I had to contact one of my Jegnas, Dr. Jeremiah Wright, just to say, man, you got to help me in this.
So look, we brothers together then, because he's a father to both of us, man. The great Jeremiah Wright, man.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So you one of his sons then.
We love Jeremiah Wright, man. We used to get him to come down here to preach for us, and we go to dinner and laugh and joke. In fact, I can't take he and my wife in the restaurant because they cut up too much. I can't even.
You know what? Then I know you know Baba J, because you can't take him. No, and your wife is right there with him.
Right there with him.
Put out. You better just order it to go and take it to the house, man.
Wow. So listen, one of the things that you made me realize is that the education that we're receiving, that we're calling in seminary or divinity school,
yes, sir,
is not changing us to help Black people, to lift up. In fact, what I would say is what we're doing in church is we're still operating in European paradigms. We're just locating Jesus in Africa, and it's not helping us.
Ooh.
I've heard you say a lot about jailbreaking the universities.
Yes, sir.
So I'd like some advice about how in the world do we jailbreak seminary, divinity school?
Man, first of all, you are already a son of and in conversation with the cat who has to answer that question, because that's the same question I would ask him and still ask. Look, man, I remember one time Dr. Wright, Reverend Wright, Baba J, Jeremiah Wright came to DC. It was the weekend of the first Obama inauguration. And we all know the indefensible way that the Obamas treated Jeremiah Wright to this day.
Yes.
And so we want, that's indefensible. There's no anybody making an argument for them. That's fine. But let's just be very clear. I mean, I'm not even talking about then. I'm talking about now. So he preached at Howard. He always preaches Martin Luther King birthday weekend. And it was just before inauguration. So it's 2009. And we had invited him. He was the first John and Eula Cleveland distinguished lecturer at Howard. We got some money in the African States Department from a couple in their will. We used it to create a distinguished lecture series. We invited Reverend Wright. He spent a whole week in DC, lectured at the divinity school, the law school, did something remarkable. And so, I gave him a key to an office in the African States Department. And just before it was, before he preached, and it's called Jeremiah Wright Sunday. So the place was packed, 1,500 people, had overflow rooms everywhere. He called me to the stage. I want to return now the key to Dr. Carr, who confessed to me that he was born and raised in the church. I said, come on, man. You're trying, you know how he does. He was signifying the whole time, man. And I'm like, so anyway, I told him, man, you got to keep the key. That's his key. He got that key to this day. But I said it to say this. Even as he was kind of having some fun, he was teaching this lesson. And he gave them a sermon. The name of that sermon, and you know what, drop your email in the chat, bro, because we're gonna exchange address. I gotta send you this sermon, man. It's called "Look Who's in the Stands." And what he did was, and you know how Jeremiah, right? He gave a genealogy. I think that is the answer to that question. He starts in Africa. He started by saying he ran track, and he named one of his track buddies, and he said this guy was incredible, man. He said I was the slowest man on the track team. We ran the relay, the 4x4 relay. He said I was the third leg because they put the weak runner in the third leg. So then he says, but the fourth leg was our best runner. Right? And so the first guy shot out, boom, hand off second guy, boom, extended lead, gave it to me, and I could feel the guy running up on me. I'm doing, he passed me, but I knew if I could just get it to my man, he got to me. Now you know I'm going because you're a minister. You know you done built the sermon. You know who that fourth guy is already, man. Jesus, right? So I mean, but what he says is the first leg. He's talking about Africa. He's talking about, our intellectual work and our culture. Then he passes off to the next leg. And he said the third leg was the fracturing of the denominations and all the confusion in the church. He's using Christianity, but the fourth leg was Christ. But then he said, look who's in the stands cheering us on. And he started naming all the ancestors. So in other words, when I think any form of organized religion is, I suppose, in that metaphor, just an attempt, as Howard Thurman would say, to try to reconcile what we can perceive into something we can move around so we can make it from day to day. But there's a reality beyond our descriptions that exists regardless of how we try to describe them. So those people in the stands, those ancestors are there regardless of whether so when those Europeans came into Africa with Christianity, their version of Christianity, the Africans were not buying it until they said, well, Jesus is an ancestor. And they said, oh, okay. And that was their point of entry. And then they drove them into all this confusion. But they weren't going to accept it until, because as the Europeans would say, you don't get to God except through your ancestors. So you had to make Jesus. So that's why we know that finally in the church, the Christian church, at least the Black church, in terms of ways of knowing, Jesus is somebody we know. This isn't an abstract. It's not just transactional. Right. I want to live forever. Of course, there's that, and we got to reconcile that question of non-existence, which is not an African thing at all. The Europeans have introduced fear into the question of religion and spirituality. Now we scared. What must I do to be saved? Are there words I say it against, kind of thing? Or I can have a deathbed confession. I mean, all this confusion comes in. But ultimately, the thing that hasn't been corrupted, at least as far as you help me. That's why I'm going to see what you say about this and think about this. The thing that seems to have survived in terms of Africana ways of knowing is this idea that there's a relationship between whatever set the universe in motion and that we are part of that can't be reduced to a book, or which is why no matter how well you craft your sermon or come through the text, you're going to need something more than that for people to, and then it's going to somehow be in that hum. It's going to be in that communal hymn. It's going to be in that movement. And then this spirit comes in, and it could be Vodun, Candomblé, Santeria, the Baptist church, bench watching, feet washing. That thing there don't fit in any name. That is the thing beyond our capacity. And I think finally what we have to do, at least it seemed to me, would be useful. If we can let go of those elements that were introduced into our ways of knowing as a means of controlling us, I trust that we'll find our way to those things that will sustain us. But I don't know how we root that out. Let me ask you. I mean, what have your experiences been? Because you and Jeremiah Wright got a relationship that I know you probably answered this question in many different ways in terms of your practice. What have you found out that works better?
I think it is this kind of Sankofa thing, going back and fetching and getting what I heard you describe before as the vibe in the church, the vibration in the church. I think that will bring us out, because, one of my concerns is that we're so interested in this white sounding praise and worship music that we have basically taken the soul out of our music, right? And so that when the preaching comes up, it's hard for people to make those connections.
Wow. Well, that's powerful. Is that being taught in the seminary?
No.
Okay. Oh, is that because I'm just thinking about, help me, because I mean, I hear y'all talk about homiletics. I hear you talk about into the black seminaries, but you're saying now this is coming from somewhere. Where's it coming from? Where's it coming from, Errol?
I don't know if I have an answer. I think it may be this need to kind of fit into what you call the social structure.
Yes, sir.
This American capitalist society, which the church is beginning to look more and more like corporation than these agents for change for our communities, for our people.
Yes.
So all of that could be feeding into it.
Oh, that's, I mean, because I mean, and you know this better than I do. I mean, the Christianity that we adapted, as we know, during enslavement. It's interesting. Michael Gomez makes this point in his book, Exchanging Our Country Marks. He says, now, of course, we can't look to the archive for any evidence of this, and we don't have any way to really assert this other than the traces we have that's left. But he says, for example, in North America, in fact, where you are in Louisiana, he used that as one of his centers because, of course, we know New Orleans was the biggest port for the trade in enslaved Africans in North America. I mean, people came through New Orleans, and we know, of course, that where you are, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, all those areas, that's really the outer edge of the Caribbean. So, I mean, there's as much, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So y'all got as much in common with Haiti.
It's my last name, Domain.
Oh, Domain. Oh, yeah. Your people, man, have been part of them people cutting French throats in the Revolution.
Yes.
Because they had to ship some of them Negroes to New Orleans, and then y'all messed around, turned up the rest of the place, Points Coupe. So, but one of the things Gomez talks about is that there's no evidence that the majority of our people were Christian as late as the second third of the 19th century. So in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, you really don't see our black people come because we're in the plantations, and especially where you're from. We're not talking about intimate household relationships, small numbers of black people in houses or in intimate. No, we're talking about huge plantations. Them Negroes are not Christians. They are either they bring in their religions from Africa, their spiritual religion, or they were born here, but they're so closely engaged in those rituals. That's the blacksmiths, the men. I mean, everybody, all that ironwork down there in southern Louisiana. These are, these are African spiritualists. Ogun, all that stuff is there. Now, what ends up happening though after the Civil Wars, we know the black church becomes a backbone institution in our governance structure to allow us to do political work and have our spiritual work. So people are becoming Christians, but then the class element comes in. Like down there, like for example, the black Catholics. I mean, you know this better than I do. In southern Louisiana, the black Catholic Church is really the home of the black Catholic Church in some ways because of that French connection. But at the same time, there's an elite practice, and of course, it's got everything to do with race mixing, skin color, the free people of color, all that stuff in Louisiana going on. Class begins to emerge, and Christianity becomes, in some ways, a way that this black upper class begins to separate itself from the masses of all them hooting and hollering Negroes that at the juke joint on Saturday night, and then Sunday they bring all that rhythm into the. I ain't messing with these. So seminaries almost become, for terms of black seminaries, as you know, a way of control. This was the battle. So black ministers, most black ministers not going to seminary. They learning to preach in their little churches, but the Negroes that start going to seminary are considered the talented 10th, the race leaders. They looking at these other Negroes like y'all unlettered. There's this whole back and forth in the AME Church, AME Zion Church. Bishop Walters writing to Booker T. Washington saying, look, I don't trust none of these Negroes out here preaching who ain't been to seminary. They can't read. They in here humming and hollering. We're never going to be civilized. Now, so I'd say this. That tension seems to me still exists in the black church. Whether it be the storefront churches of the Great Migration, Curtis Mayfield, grandmama had a spiritual house of worship in their little apartment. All of that stuff, a W.C. Handy coming at me, all that stuff comes into secular music, but the sacred secular split has never existed in our governance structures.
Right.
So whether it be Sam Cooke and them quartets in Chicago, whether it be Curtis Mayfield, Isaac, you name it, that that secular practice really isn't secular. It's our spiritual music that exploded past the doors of the church because its foundation was never the church. So when you raise this problem we have now, some of that might be, ironically, thinking about when Olivia raised that question of money, the market, which has curated Black popular culture and absorbed it into this capitalist rhythm, that might be the, for lack of a better term, white lash of the market now invading the church, because the church is now being driven by the musical choices that have been curated out beyond our capacity to control. So now but the thing the church always had, until now maybe, was the capacity to protect itself from the world, so to speak. So maybe what we're really facing is this spiritual crisis that our institutions, all of our institutions, whether it be the church, whether it be the mosque, whether it be, are faced with, which is we no longer have the same political formation to use our churches as a means to resist this external world, which was easier maybe with apartheid, was easy with Jim Crow, and maybe got us through the 70s and 80s. But the farther we get from that lash and Jim Crow, the more this social structure commingles with our governance structure. And we are now just at a loss. So, I mean, can we, well, I started to say rebuild, but let me ask you this. I know we're going on, but I really, I think this is something, because a lot of people, I'm sure, in Knubia right now listening and are facing the same question. I started to ask you, can we rebuild these institutions? But you've already, asserted, and I agree with you, that maybe the goal isn't to rebuild. The goal is, to borrow a term from somebody who ain't using it in any real sense, build back better. How can we build our spiritual practices back better, so that maybe looking over time at what worked, we can bring that forward, as you say in the Sankofa, and the things that we see, oh, this was a misstep right here, we could either discard or re-engineer. I mean, what kind of steps can be made? Because you're in it every day, I'm assuming.
I think it's going to take education at the ground level for everybody, not high academics, right? But talking to everybody, sitting in circles, having conversations about what we're learning, what we're reading, connecting back to, as I mentioned earlier, African traditional religions, and showing, right? Like in the coming week, I'm going to teach where Christmas came from.
Oh, boy.
That's a lot of people, and I ain't trying to take nobody to Jesus, but I think you need to know the truth.
Lord have mercy. Oh, I can't. Oh, man, I want to hear that, man. Who am I emailing in the chat? I hope you gonna record it?
Yes.
Oh, hold on. I'll put my email. You gotta send me that, John. Well, you
Right,
said
no problem.
yes, and I gotta send you that Jeremiah Wright sermon too. But I don't even want to preview, because I look, I'm on the edge of my seat. I want to know what you gonna say.
I'm not quite there yet. I can't give a preview.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. I know how y'all are, man. I've eavesdropped on more than a few hardcore genius preachers, including Jeremiah Wright. Y'all can't start cooking, man. I know sometimes you get there and the thing going another way, and you got to just take it. It's like jazz musicians, man. So,
definitely.
When you are ready, Brother Errol, you know where to drop it. If you would,
I will do
with the family.
That's another track. Oh, Urias, yes. You see what Urias doing right there. That's a whole another brand in Knubia. Ain't there, you brother.